Okay, this is piece 69, David by Donatello. It's a probably pretty likely that when you think of David, you probably think of this statue by Michelangelo. Instead, our piece is this one right here, the David by Donatello. Donatello was one of the 4 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and he got that acclaim because of his great statues. This statue of the David is the first male nude piece created in 1,000 years. Since the fall of the Roman Empire, there had been no nude statue made. The medieval art did have some nudeness, but it was rare, and it was mostly associated with people who were sinning and headed to hell. The statue that we see here by Donatello is standing in a contrapposto pose, which hopefully you remember from our classic Greek era, where the knee is bent, the hip is out over here. And the other thing about this is that it is standing alone, freestanding. It's not attached to anything to hold it up. And that should be contrasted with these statues that are on Chartres Cathedral in the Gothic style, really high relief, but they are connected to the building, and that's what gives them, they get support to stand. And so standing freely like this is an art unto its own. It is carved in the round also, meaning that you can look at it from the back side and from the front side. The detail is the same all the way around. And it is made out of bronze. Bronze was a common, common. It was not uncommon in Greek era in particular to do Roman statues, but bronze is something that can be melted down and used for something else. So we don't have many that survived, but our seated boxer in bronze did survive as well. Both of these are done with lost wax casting, which we'll look at further in class. More form, this piece is 5'2", which is my height, and it is smaller than an average male. Here's an average male showing you just the comparison of size. And furthermore, while this is calling back to the Greek classic art, what it doesn't have that was classical Greeks is this doryphorus form with lots of muscles, an ideal male. Rather, this is a naturalistic depiction of a male, a young shepherd boy, actually. The context for this that explains its young shepherd boy appearance is that it is depicting a battle between the Israelites and the Philistines, in which the Philistine fighter Goliath, who was just a giant, called out to the Israelite leader Saul, saying, "Hey, let's end this battle by having a one-on-one fight. I'll fight whoever you send out." Well, Saul, the Israelite leader, didn't want to go, and the shepherd boy David spoke up and said, "Hey, I'll go." And so out went David with his sling. Here he is in this painting. This is a pretty common subject for paintings. And he picked up 5 river rocks, threw one rock in his sling, hit Goliath in the head. Goliath fell over, and David went out, took Goliath's sword, and cut off Goliath's head. That's why we have another depiction here of a young David taking Goliath's head. So, more context is the city-state of Florence was rivaled with the city-state of Milan, which was bigger, a little more militarily aggressive. Both of these were popular trading city-states, very vibrant. But the Duke of Milan attempted multiple times to capture the city-state of Florence, and look at its access to the sea here. And Florence was able to rally and overcome or hold back at least Milan. And so Florence identified with this David and Goliath fighting depiction. More context is Donatello was likely commissioned by this man, Cosimo Giovanni de' Medici. He was a very wealthy banker, and his family would really hold sway in the politics of Florence for hundreds of years. And he, we believe, funded Donatello, commissioned him to make a David statue. And the idea would be, if you had a David statue in your garden, it would say, hey, yeah, I can relate to being a Florentine. I can relate to being an underdog. I relate to our identity as these Davids that overcome Goliath. Well, that's probably true. I mean, there's some possibility that he didn't do it, but probably true that Cosimo de' Medici did do this because he, we know, invested $500 million in art in Italy. He invested in Donatello, Leonardo da Vinci, and Michelangelo for sure. So could be that he had commissioned Donatello to do the David. It ended up, though, being placed here in this public building in Florence, where you can see it today. Okay, content of our David is, it has some sexual, erotic, and perhaps homosexual allusions to it. When you look over here at the leg that's up on the head of Goliath, the helmet has these feathers, and the feathers are going up into the private parts of David, alluding to overt sexuality, probably. Well, not alluding, it is overt sexuality. On the helmet of Goliath as well, we see a chariot for Eros, who is the Greek god of love, also known as Cupid in the Roman pantheon. So we also know, and this is perhaps a little more contextual, that David's name means beloved. And the Florentines were pretty obsessed with just the beauty of young men. They found them alluring, and they valued that beauty. So David has a different contextual tone there of sexuality. And then also on the front side here, we look at the David face and his stance, and we're wondering, is this bravado? He lacks that muscular look that we think of as a fighter. So is it not that he's showing fighting, but perhaps he's showing contemplation, some internal thought. Is he perhaps thinking about the role of God in him overcoming Goliath? Because part of the metaphor here is David was so little. How could he overcome Goliath? He would have needed the hand of God to help him. And so is that what he's thinking about? Or is this contrapposto pose, his foot resting on Goliath and him holding Goliath's sword, is he showing pride and swagger? That interpretation is sort of up to you, the viewer.